Welcome to the deep dive. We've been sent this really fascinating stack of analysis and research materials, all focused on one book, Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Wings and Ruin. If you're familiar with the ACOTAR series, you know that's book 3, and it's a big one. Our mission for this deep dive is to pull out the absolute most important nuggets from this material. You know, the key plot drivers, the surprising character insights, the deep thematic connections, and some of the cool mythological ties. To give you a shortcut, really, to being well informed about what makes ACOTAR such a pivotal and often debated book in the series. Think of it as getting the insider's view without having to pore over pages and pages yourself. And to guide us through all of this information, we have our expert here.
Merhaba, I am Asant Iskan Yildiz, and I'm ready to explore this material with you.
Excellent. Okay, let's unpack this right away. For anyone maybe just discovering Sarah J. Maas or curious about the ACOTAR world, the material gives us some context. How does Maas fit into the contemporary fantasy landscape, and where does A Court of Wings and Ruin ACO, as the fans call it, sit within the larger series?
Well, the material highlights Sarah J. Maas as a dominant force in contemporary fantasy, particularly in the young and new adult space. Her global sales numbers, over 75 million copies across series like Throne of Glass and Crescent City, really speak volumes. They're huge.
75 million.
Yeah. The ACOTAR series itself is set in the magical realm of Prythian. It's often labeled romantasy because it blends epic romance with high-stakes political power struggles and war. ACOTAR, specifically, is described in the material as the culmination of the initial journey focusing on Feyre Archeron. It's the third main novel and marks a significant shift.
A shift. Okay, tell me about that. How does it shift?
Yes, the analysis points out that while the first two books lean heavily into high fantasy romance, ACOTAR broadens the scope considerably. The narrative weight, according to the sources, shifts more towards war mechanics, the gathering of various factions, and large-scale conflict resolution. So while the romantic elements are definitely still there, the fantasy aspect gets a much stronger military and political dimension. It's really where the scope of the world expands dramatically.
Okay, that genre shift is definitely something readers feel. I can see that. Now, before we dive into ACOTAR itself, the material makes it clear we have to understand the setup from the first two books, really get it. Can you walk us through the absolute critical points from A Court of Thorns and Roses ACOTAR and A Court of Mist and Fury ACOMAF that directly lead into ACOTAR? What does the material emphasize from those earlier books?
Absolutely. A Court of Thorns and Roses is the origin story, basically. Feyre, a mortal huntress, kills a Fey wolf and is taken by Tamlin, the Spring Court's High Lord, as recompense according to an ancient treaty. The material notes its inspiration from things like Beauty and the Beast and Tamlin.
Classic influences.
Exactly. Feyre navigates the magical court, learns about the Blight and Amarantha's tyranny under the mountain. The crucial points here are her trials, her death, and her resurrection as a High Fae, imbued with power from all 7 High Lords. Key characters like Feyre, Tamlin, Rhysand, who's initially presented more antagonistically, and Lucien are introduced.
Got it. Origin story, transformation. What about the second book?
A Court of Mist and Fury, ACOMAF, is perhaps even more critical as the direct precursor to ACOTAR. The material gives it more weight. It opens with Feyre dealing with the psychological aftermath of Under the Mountain's serious PTSD, and her relationship with Tamlin becomes increasingly stifling, controlling even.
Yeah, that was tough to read.
Definitely. Her bargain with Rhysand from ACOTAR kicks in, and she's taken to the Night Court, specifically to Velaris. This is where she finds healing, learns to control her powers, and meets Rhysand's inner circle.
And this is where the relationship dynamic completely changes, right? The big shift.
Exactly. And here's where the analysis gets really specific. Rhysand and Feyre discover they are mates, bound together. The material highlights this mate bond, not just as a romantic connection, but as a vital plot device that fundamentally reshapes loyalties and drives conflict.
A plot device. Interesting way to put it.
Well, think about it. Tamlin's inability to understand or accept this bond, viewing Feyre as stolen rather than choosing to leave, that becomes a primary motivation for his disastrous alliance with the King of Hybern. The analysis explicitly states this bond is a vital narrative engine driving political and personal betrayals. It fuels so much of the conflict.
Okay, that makes sense. It's not just about love, it's about power and politics too.
Precisely. ACOMAF also details the growing threat from the Hybern King. There's a quest for the Book of Breathings, and a critical betrayal by the mortal queens. And, crucially, Feyre's sisters, Nesta and Elaine, are forcibly transformed into High Fae by the ancient powerful cauldron.
Right, that was shocking.
Huge moment. The book ends with Feyre making a strategic move, returning to the Spring Court under the guise of a broken woman, but secretly acting as a spy for the Night Court. The material notes that Comath mirrors the Hades and Persephone myth, with Rhysand as the misunderstood ruler of a dark realm where Feyre finds her true strength.
Wow, that is a lot of ground covered and definitely sets the stage for the war. So a co-war opens with Feyre back in the Spring Court, playing that dangerous spy role. The material spends a good bit of time on this section. What were the main takeaways about her strategy and what the analysis revealed about her character growth during this period?
This section is rich with insight, yeah. The material describes Feyre's strategy as adopting the persona of a broken, traumatized woman. It's an act. Her goal is to gather intelligence on Tamlin's alliance with Hybern and the King's war plans. It really underscores her intelligence, her incredible resilience, and her surprising acting ability.
She really had to sell it.
Absolutely. There's a constant tension as she has to oscillate between performing the role of a trauma victim and being the determined high lady and spy she's becoming. Her purpose here, the analysis emphasizes, was greater than vengeance. It was solely about gathering critical information for the impending war effort.
So how did she pull it off? What's the key insight there?
The key insight here is how she does it. The material suggests Feyre weaponizes the societal expectation of a broken, traumatized woman. She deliberately embodies the weak image Tamlin and Ianthe the priestess try to project onto her, using their underestimation of her as both a shield and a tool.
Clever. Using their own biases against them.
Exactly. She is, as the analysis puts it, a wolf in sheep's clothing, playing a dangerous game of deception.
Yeah.
She goes so far as to pretend to be manipulated by Rhysand, even allowing others in Tamlin's court to see the physical evidence of his emotional tantrums, specifically to sow seeds of distrust against him and Ianthe.
That's a powerful observation, weaponizing those expectations. Does the material offer a specific lens for this, like a feminist reading?
Yes, it does. The analysis offers a feminist reading of this period, suggesting that Feyre actively regains her agency by exploiting her enemy's patriarchal assumptions about weakness and femininity. It's a strategic reversal where she uses their preconceptions against them. It highlights her growth from the more reactive, often helpless victim figure she was under the mountain in ACOTAR to this incredibly proactive, calculated strategist in ACOTAR.
That's a really sharp take. Okay, so moving beyond the spy work. The material also delves into the complex political maneuvering leading up to the war, the alliances, the betrayals, that crucial meeting of the High Lords. What insights did you find there, and what stood out about the discussion of the Wall? That always felt significant.
Oh, definitely. The meeting of the High Lords of the Dawn Court is a pivotal political moment, and the analysis compares it to significant mythological councils like Elrond's Council in Lord of the Rings. The material points out the palpable tensions, the deep-seated old grudges, like Tarquin's justified resentment towards Feyre and Rhysand from Akamath.
Yeah, he had good reason to be angry.
He did. And you see the very fragile, necessary agreements that are forged there. The prevailing philosophy, according to the sources, becomes incredibly pragmatic. We don't have the luxury of good ideas, only a choice between bad ones.
Wow. Grim but necessary.
It's a moment of desperate unity. Hybern's strategies were multi-pronged, using Jurian to manipulate the mortal queens with promises of power or eternal youth. His relentless attempts to destroy the Wall and amassing a vast army. Alliances coalesced primarily around the Night Court, drawing in reluctant support from parts of the Autumn and Spring Courts. The material confirms Tamlin's initial alliance with Hybern was indeed a betrayal, although it later complicates this by revealing his role as a double agent, sort of.
Right. Tamlin's motivations are always complicated.
Very. Ianthe predictably is highlighted as consistently self-serving. Jurian's role is fascinating, a resurrected human warrior who seems allied with Hybern but is actually working against him.
Lots of double-crossing. And the Wall.
And then there's the Wall. The material treats it as a hugely significant symbolic element. Initially, it's presented as a physical and symbolic barrier protecting and separating humans and Fae. However, the analysis notes it's shown to be increasingly porous and ultimately revealed as a deeply flawed, unsustainable solution to the underlying conflicts, even before its physical destruction.
So its collapse isn't just about the battle, it means more.
Exactly. Its destruction by the Cauldron isn't merely a strategic victory for Hybern. The material frames it as a symbolic breaking of an old, unsustainable order. It violently forces a reckoning and a reassessment of human-Fae relations across Prythian. It's a powerful metaphor for artificial divisions that ultimately fail to contain or solve fundamental conflicts, pushing Prythian into a future where coexistence must be renegotiated, likely violently at first. The analysis points out its decay before its fall mirrors the breakdown of the treaty it symbolized.
Okay, that adds a whole layer to it. Shifting gears a bit to some of the really deep lore that comes into play. The cauldron itself, the Book of Breathings, and especially Nesta and Elaine's unexpected connection to these ancient powers. What did the material reveal about these elements and how they function in the story?
The cauldron is absolutely central to the power dynamics and lore explored in this book, according to the analysis. It's described as immensely powerful, essentially the source of life and magic in Prythian. It can resurrect the dead, it transforms mortals into high fae, and it's powerful enough to bring down the wall. Hybern's primary goal is to control this power for destruction.
The ultimate weapon.
Pretty much. The Book of Breathings, conversely, was created to possess the power to nullify or counteract the cauldron's magic.
And the sisters get pulled right into this.
They do. Nesta and Elaine's transformation by the cauldron is a key event. The analysis highlights that Nesta is said to have taken something back from it, possessing an unknown, raw, potent force that's different from typical high fae power. Elaine, meanwhile, gains the ability to see the future. She becomes a seer.
Two very different, very powerful abilities.
Very. The material also points to the surreal as a vital source of ancient information, an all-knowing creature compelled to speak the truth when caught, drawing parallels to mythological oracles. The surreal provides crucial intelligence, revealing Nesta's inexplicable connection to the cauldron and identifying Amren and the Book of Breathings as key to winning the war. Its death is a significant blow.
Poor surreal. Okay, so Nesta and Elaine. What's the deeper insight there?
And here's a really fascinating insight from the analysis. Nesta and Elaine, despite the trauma of their forced transformation, become inadvertent agents who ultimately disrupt Hybern's calculated plans. Their abilities, derived directly from the cauldron through his cruelty, are less refined than inherited Fey magic, but are more fundamentally linked to Prythian's base magical source.
So they're like wild cards.
Exactly. The material doesn't just see them as sisters getting powers, it frames them as living embodiments of the cauldron's own disturbed will, unpredictable joker cards in the magical ecosystem whose very nature thwarts Hybern's attempts at total control. Their powers are a magical backlash caused by his actions. And the cauldron itself is linked to ancient Celtic mythology, specifically the Paradideni, or Cauldron of Rebirth.
That idea of them being almost accidental sources of nature, embodying the cauldron's unpredictable will, that's a great aha moment from the material. Really cool. Following all this setup and lore, the war itself is the climax. The material covers the battles, obviously, but also some major sacrifices and, quite surprisingly, multiple resurrections. What did you learn about these events and the specific meaning the analysis attributes to the resurrections? Because that happens a lot.
It does. The war is the core of the latter half of the book. The material discusses key battles like the attack on the Summer Court and the massive final confrontation. Ancient, powerful beings are brought into the conflict. The Bone Carver, the Weaver, also known as Striga and Bryaxis, joining the fight against Hybern, often at a great cost. The analysis evokes mythological parallels here to unleash chthonic or primal forces, beings described as older than the Fey race itself.
Bring out the big, scary guns.
Pretty much. Significant sacrifices occur. Feyre's human father gives his life to save Nesta and Elaine. The Surreal is killed. And Amren's sacrifice is particularly detailed. She unleashes her true, terrifying, destructive form to annihilate a huge portion of Hybern's army. In doing so, she seems to die and shatters the cauldron. Then Rhysand also makes the ultimate sacrifice, giving his power to Feyre to mend the shattered cauldron.
Right, heartbreaking moments, but not permanent.
But the analysis strongly emphasizes that these deaths aren't final. Rhysand is resurrected by the combined power of all the High Lords, a mirroring of Feyre's own resurrection in ACOTAR. Amren is also brought back, choosing a high fae body but losing her original immense ancient power. The material stresses that these multiple resurrections are far more than just a convenient plot device to save beloved characters. They are a thematic motif.
A motif? How so?
Highlighting the fundamental interconnectedness of life, death, and power in Prythian. It underscores that the ultimate power, the power to give life, comes from shared sacrifice and a collective will, not from any single individual's strength or magic.
That's really interesting. The fact that all the High Lords, including Tamlin, contribute to Rhysand's resurrection makes that collective power point hit harder. That's wow.
Exactly. It signifies a crucial moment of unity and suggests a potential rebalancing of those old enmities, even if just for that moment. And Amren's return as a high fae, while saving her life, implies that re-entering the world after such a profound expenditure of ancient power comes at a cost. It integrates her more fully, perhaps more vulnerably, into the world she fought to save. The analysis argues this challenges the typical fantasy trope of the singular, all-powerful hero, instead stressing the vital importance of interdependence and shared power.
That analysis of the resurrections as a symbol of collective power and interdependence is genuinely insightful. That adds so much meaning. So after the dust settles from this massive war, what does the material tell us about the immediate aftermath and how it sets up the next books in the series?
The aftermath of ACOTAR functions to wrap up the main war plot, but is also explicitly groundwork for future books, particularly Frost and Starlight and Silver Flames. The shattered cauldron is repaired and hidden away by ancient beings Draken and Miriam. The destruction of the wall necessitates a brand new human-Fey treaty, which Feyre takes the lead in calling a meeting to discuss. The immense task of rebuilding Prythian begins everywhere.
A whole new world order, essentially.
In a way, yes. The analysis highlights that the characters, especially Feyre, Rhysand, and the Inner Circle, immediately begin grappling with the psychological toll and trauma of the war. Tamlin is left isolated in his ruined court, his future very uncertain. Lucien's path is also left open, marked by his challenging mate bond with Elaine and hinting at his future alliances.
And Feyre's role, how does that evolve?
A key takeaway for the material here is the solidification of Feyre's role as High Lady. The analysis emphasizes that by the end of ACOTAR, this role goes far beyond simply being Rhysand's mate or partner with powers. She emerges as a crucial political architect and a visionary for a potential new Prythian, actively engaging in interspecies diplomacy and leading the post-war reconstruction efforts. This is presented as her redefining female leadership within the Fey world, leveraging her unique background as a former human to potentially act as a bridge builder. The analysis notes her evolution shifts from a focus on individual survival to contemplating continental reform. It's a big step up.
That's huge for her character. And seeds for the future. What specific things does the material point out?
And yes, the material explicitly points out the seeds for future stories woven throughout the aftermath. The psychological wounds of war become a central theme for the novella Frost and Starlight. Nesta's intense grief, rage, and complicated coping mechanisms, alongside her volatile relationship with Cassian, are heavily foreshadowed, clearly setting up Silver Flames.
Yes. ACOSF. Makes sense.
Elaine's story, her trauma, her mate bond with Lucien, and a potential connection to Azriel is also left open. Tamlin's isolation, Mor's unresolved trauma, and a hint about a dark and dangerous thing in the woods, the complex human-Fey treaty negotiations, and specific ancient threats like Cochet, still imprisoned, and Vasa, plus Elaine's prophecy about a firebird, identified as Vasa, are all deliberate hooks for future narratives. Even Feyre's pregnancy is subtly hinted at through discussions about the difficulties of Fey conception.
It's clear Maz is planning far ahead. Okay, the material dedicates a whole section to character analysis specifically within the context of ACOTAR. Instead of going through every single character in exhaustive detail, could we focus on some of the most interesting points the analysis makes about their growth, trauma, and key relationships during this book? What really stood out to you?
Certainly. Let's look at a few key figures. For Feyre, her arc in ACOTAR is analyzed as a journey from spy to war strategist to emerging diplomat. She learns to wield her considerable power alongside cunning and resilience. The material notes her unique nature, resurrected by all the High Lords, makes her uniquely suited to the task of potentially uniting Prythian. She literally embodies the collective power she championed during the war.
She carries that power within her.
Exactly. Rhysand's analysis highlights his strategic genius as a High Lord and the immense burden of his leadership responsibilities. His trauma from Amarantha's reign deeply shapes him, driving his actions and his protectiveness. His ultimate willingness to sacrifice himself underscores his thematic importance as a leader who understands the cost of power. The analysis points out that his carefully constructed public image as a cruel tyrant, initially a protective measure for Valaris, paradoxically becomes a strategic asset in wartime, allowing him to make the harsh, necessary decisions others cannot, all while contrasting sharply with his true protective nature.
That mask he wears. And what about the Archeron sisters, Nesta and Elaine? Their transformation was such a huge moment in Aftermath, and they play critical roles here.
Absolutely. The Archeron sisters, Nesta and Elaine, are a central focus of the character analysis in ACOTAR. Nesta's character is defined here by her intense rage, her deep grief, and that raw, untamed power she seemingly took from the cauldron during her transformation. Her unexpected role in the final battle, specifically killing the Hybrid King, and her increasingly complex, volatile relationship with Cassian are highlighted as key developments setting up her future story.
She's a force to be reckoned with.
Definitely. Elaine's gentle, seemingly fragile nature is contrasted with the brutal realities of the war, but her burgeoning seer abilities prove vital. And her own unexpected, pivotal action in killing the king is also noted. Their relationship as sisters, fraught with past resentments but bound by shared trauma, seen as mirroring Prithian's larger struggle for unity and understanding amidst conflicting strengths and weaknesses. They represent different ways of processing trauma and engaging with newfound power.
That dynamic between them is so compelling. And Rhysand's inner circle, Cassian, Asriel, Mor, and Amren, are so central to the story.
The inner circle is analyzed as representing found family and unwavering loyalty in the face of unimaginable odds. Cassian is the fiercely loyal general, defined by his warrior identity and his complex bond with Nesta. Asriel's the spy master, known for his shadow singing and wielding the magical knife truth teller. His analysis touches on his quiet strength and his complicated, often painful experiences with love, including his unrequited feelings for Mor and his developing intriguing interest in Elaine.
Asriel's quiet suffering, yeah.
Mor is the third in command, wrestling with past trauma and making a significant personal revelation about her sexual identity and past love with the mortal queen Andromache. And Amren, the ancient being with vast knowledge, has an analysis that really focuses on her sacrifice and subsequent transformation. As symbolizing her full integration into the world, she helps save giving up her otherworldly power and nature to fully belong to Prithian.
It's clear these characters are carrying a lot of weight. What about Tamlin and Lucien? Their journeys are also significantly impacted in Ecole.
Tamlin's analysis in the material is quite tragic, as you might expect. His state after Ecomath is characterized by a descent into possessiveness, uncontrolled rage, and a complete inability to process his trauma or Feyre's departure in a healthy way. His initial alliance with Hivern is presented as a desperate, misguided attempt born out of that breakdown, a distorted effort to get back what he felt he lost.
It's hard to watch his decline.
It is. While he has moments of potential redemption in Ekoa, saving Feyre and contributing to Rhysand's resurrection, the analysis concludes his tragedy stems from his emotional paralysis and inability to communicate, ultimately leading to his isolation by the book's end.
And Lucien, he's caught between worlds, too.
Lucien of Vansera navigates shifting, often painful loyalties throughout Akour. The material notes his past trauma, including witnessing his lover Gisminda's death, is a constant undercurrent. His complex mate bond with Elaine, her initial reluctance, and his efforts to understand and connect with her are central to his story arc here. He represents themes of displacement, the difficult search for belonging, and the tension between fated destiny and individual choice in the face of trauma.
And that theory about his father.
Ah, yes. A particularly interesting point from the analysis is the discussion around the popular fan theory, strongly hinted at but not explicitly confirmed in this book, that his real father is Helion, the High Lord of the Day Court, not Beran of the Autumn Court.
Oh, the displaced prince or hidden sun god theory? I've heard that one.
Exactly. The analysis based on his appearance and magic adds layers to his internal struggle for identity and suggests a potential future role bridging courts. His eventual association with a group of exiles, including Jurian and Vasa, also points towards a movement beyond the rigid structures of the traditional Fae courts.
Wow, there really is so much depth to these characters when you look at the analysis like that. It's incredible. And the material also highlights the rich mythological and symbolic layers woven into the book. What were some of the most striking connections or symbols the analysis found?
The analysis identifies deep echoes of global mythologies throughout Akour. For instance, the ancient powers, the Bone Carver, the Weaver, and Cochet, are depicted as beings older than the Fae race itself. The material interprets them as a dark reflection of the Greek Moirai, or fates, controlling destinies, and Cochet is directly linked to the immortal Cochet from Russian folklore. They represent a more primitive, perhaps chaotic order that predates the established Fae courts.
Like primal forces unleashed.
Precisely. Other creatures also carry significant symbolism. The Suriel is likened to an oracle, perhaps connected to the archangel Serial, representing hidden knowledge and guidance. Bryaxis, the terrifying shadow creature trapped in the library pit, is seen as a symbol of suppressed ancient or dangerous knowledge. Its desire for a window to the stars, moon, or sun can be interpreted as a metaphor for seeking enlightenment or reconnection with a wider, brighter cosmos beyond its confinement.
That's a cool interpretation of Bryaxis.
The Illyrians, with their distinctive bat-like wings, are analyzed as differing from typical angelic imagery, representing raw power, freedom, and also vulnerability. The barbaric tradition of cutting female Illyrian wings is highlighted as a brutal symbol of oppression.
Yeah, that tradition is horrific. What about places and objects?
The landscapes and significant objects also hold meaning. The courts themselves, tied to seasons and solar cycles, are compared to Celtic otherworlds, or distinct mythological realms, each a microcosm with its own character. The Night Court's regions are sometimes likened to areas of the Greek underworld Valaris as a kind of Elysium, the hewn city as Tartarus, and the Illyrian lands as Asphodel. Valaris, in particular, isn't just a hidden, beautiful city. The material sees it as an active ideal worth fighting for, a model for a reformed, better Prythian, not just a passive Shangri-La.
So it's more than just a safe haven.
It represents potential. The wall symbolism, as we discussed, represents a failed attempt at separation. The Ouroboros mirror, which forces characters into confronting themselves, symbolizes cycles, eternity, and the unity of opposites. And the mate bond, while presented as fate, is deeply complex, highlighting the constant tension between destiny and individual choice and trauma, as Rhysand himself notes that sometimes it chooses badly.
Destiny versus choice. A classic theme.
Yeah.
Okay, it's clear how deeply woven this book is into the fabric of the entire series, both looking back and forward. The material discusses this intertextual weaving, how ACO echoes previous books and strategically plants seeds for the future. Can you share a couple of the most notable examples of these echoes and seeds from the analysis?
Absolutely. The analysis points out several clear echoes. Feyre's resonant phrase, "To the stars who listen and the dreams that are answered," which first appears in ACOMAF, becomes a recurring symbol of hope and connection throughout ACOTAR. Rhysand's resurrection by the collective power of the High Lords is a powerful parallel to Feyre's own resurrection in ACOTAR, reinforcing that theme of shared sacrifice and the collective power needed for such miracles across the series.
That mirroring is really strong.
It is. Tamlin's unchecked possessiveness and inability to communicate are direct continuations of his problematic behavior in ACOMAF. Feyre also continues to use her art as a vital coping mechanism, building on a theme established in ACOMAF.
What about a really strong echo, maybe a reversal?
Perhaps the strongest resonance noted in the material is the dramatic reversal of the power dynamic between Feyre and Tamlin. In ACOTAR, she was his captive, brought to his court against her will. In ACOTAR, she deliberately returns to his court as a powerful high lady and a cunning spy, actively manipulating his authority and sowing discord from within. The analysis calls this a significant intertextual resonance, highlighting that it's not just about vengeance, but a profound statement about her journey from victim to agent of change and her complete reclaiming of power within the very space where she felt most powerless.
That's a fantastic point, a complete turnaround. And the seeds for the future, remind us of the key ones.
For future seeds, beyond the character setups we mentioned, like Nesta's relationship with Cassian leading into Silver Flames or Elaine's developing story and connections, the material emphasizes the lingering presence of ancient threats. Karshai is still imprisoned, Bryaxis is freed, but its purpose is uncertain. And the cauldron, though repaired, is hidden and still a source of immense, potentially dangerous power. These aren't just loose threads. The analysis sees them as deliberate foreshadowing of future, potentially more cosmic threats that go beyond the war with Hybern and promise to expand the scope of the ACOTAR universe significantly.
Bigger threats looming.
Seems likely. Voss's explicit connection to Cochet is a direct link for a future storyline. And as we touched on, Feyre's pregnancy, hinted at through discussions of Fae physiology and conception, is a subtle but significant seed for the future of the main family line.
Okay, so wrapping this up, how does the material summarize ACOTAR's place in the series?
To summarize our deep dive today, based on the material provided, A Court of Wings and Ruin is analyzed as the climactic peak of the ACOTAR series' initial arc. While the war against Hybern is the central plot, the book masterfully weaves in and explores complex themes of trauma, sacrifice, love, and evolving power dynamics. It doesn't just end a war, it fundamentally reshapes the political landscape and the characters within Prythian, paving the way for a new era and new conflicts.
This is a real turning point.
Absolutely. Our exploration highlighted key interpretations from the analysis. Feyre's strategic brilliance in weaponizing expectations as a spy. The mate bond acting as a critical narrative engine beyond romance. The symbolic importance of the wall's fall as the end of an outdated order. Nesta and Elaine's role as unpredictable agents of ancient power. The multiple resurrections serving as a powerful theme of collective strength and interdependence. Feyre redefining female leadership through her diplomatic efforts. Amren's sacrifice and transformation symbolizing her integration. Talon's tragic isolation stemming from his emotional inability, Lucian representing the complexities of shifting identities and court conflicts, and the presence of ancient powers pointing to deeper mythological roots and future threats. That covers a lot of ground. The material suggests the ACOTAR series continues to resonate so deeply with readers because of this combination. Complex, evolving characters, the compelling blend of romance with high-stakes fantasy, and the willingness to tackle difficult themes like trauma, grief, and leadership within a richly imagined world. ACOTAR brought these elements to a powerful head. The analysis views the subsequent novella, A Court of Frost and Starlight, specifically as a necessary bridge focusing on healing and reconstruction after the immense trauma of ACO, setting a vital emotional and narrative foundation for the character-focused stories that follow.
What an incredible deep dive. Thinking about everything we've discussed, particularly the analysis of trauma, sacrifice, and that complex nature of power, whether it's personal power, collective strength, or these ancient forces, it really leaves you wondering, in a world that has just faced such devastating conflict and transformation, how do the characters truly navigate the long road to healing and redefining themselves? Especially when the very source of their new power or identity is so intrinsically tied to that trauma and conflict. That's definitely something to ponder long after the last page. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into A Court of Wings and Ruin. We hope you found this insightful. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment to let us know what you thought or what topics you'd like us to dive into next.